But let's move swiftly on. We're running a little bit over, so I would invite Tatiana and Sarah Tiffinara-Lunardon from UNEC to provide us with an overview of the SDG indicator 652, and please try and keep it as quick as you can. I know there's a lot to go through, but given the time, thank you. So I think Tatiana, over to you first.
Yes, thank you, Ali. Yes, I will be quick, and I will start this introductory presentation on SDG indicator 6.5.2, which measures the transboundary water cooperation. The presentation will focus on its main components and on the relevance of the indicator to progress transboundary water cooperation. I am Tatiana Dmitrieva, and I'm a consultant at UNESCO Intergovernmental Hydrological Program, and I'm working with Aurélien Dumont on SDG 652. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yes, the presentation comes in several parts. The first, I will introduce the integrated monitoring initiative for SDG 6. Then I present the results of 2 monitoring exercises that took place so far in 2017 and 2020, and I will explain the methodology developed for the calculation of the indicator, which was used to have the results, and then the guidance material that was developed by UNECE and by UNESCO to support the indicator monitoring. And the last part will be presented by my colleague Sarah, and she will focus on the third reporting exercise with its template structure, with objectives and the tips and advice for reporting. Next slide, please. The monitoring of SDG indicator 6.5.2 is part of a joint effort of the 10 UN agencies that are custodians, in other words, responsible for 11 indicators under SDG 6. SDG 6 is to ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all, and it covers the whole water cycle. The integrated monitoring initiative for SDG 6 is coordinated by UN Water. Next slide, please. The target 6.5 reads as by 2030, implement integrated water resources management at all levels, including through transboundary cooperation as appropriate. It is composed of 2 indicators, 6.5.1, which measures the degree of implementation of integrated water resources management. This indicator is coordinated by United Nations Environmental Programme, UNEP. And the second indicator, 6.5.2, for which UNESCO and UNECE are responsible, is for proportion of transboundary basin area with an operational arrangement for water cooperation. Indicator 651 and 652 are complementary. For this reason, we encourage where possible the close cooperation between the focal points of 651 and 652 when reporting, to coordinate the reporting processes as far as possible. For example, for instance, 652 can provide inputs to questions related to transboundary aspects in the 651 service. Also, as shown on the map on your right, the most of the world's water worldwide are shared. There are 153 countries that share transboundary rivers and lakes in blue and transboundary aquifers in green, as it was already mentioned in the opening remarks by Sonia and by Aurélien. For this reason, the transboundary water cooperation is required. The indicator 6.5.2 is the only indicator on transboundary cooperation, and it's very important for other natural resources. Next slide, please. So far, 2 rounds of monitoring took place on 6.5.2 in 2017 and in 2020. And the results achieved showed the very high responses rate received from countries and a high level of engagement. 129 countries out of 153 sharing transboundary water submitted reports in 2020, compared to 180 in 2017. This showed, yes, the results achieved showed that only 58% is the average national percentage of transboundary basins covered by operational arrangements. These numbers are based on 103 reports for which the final indicator could be calculated. These numbers are showing also that the road is not on track to achieve transboundary water cooperation by 2030. There are only 24 countries that reported all transboundary surface and groundwater covered by operational arrangements. The progress should be accelerated by 4 to ensure that all transboundary basins are covered by operational arrangements by 2030. As you can see on the map with more detailed information, Asia and Latin America and the Caribbean regions are the regions where the most of progress should be done during the years we have before 2030. More detailed information, you can find it in the second progress report on transboundary water cooperation. You can scan QR code to see it. It was published in 2021 under UN Water Coordination, and we analyzed the results we received so far on analyzing the reports, the country reports. The next slide, please. The results that we presented in the second progress report are based on the specific methodologies that were developed for the calculation of the indicator 6.5.2 value. There are two main elements to consider when reporting. The first one is the spatial coverage of transboundary basin areas, rivers, and groundwaters located in a state. And the second element is a precise determination of the extent to which these transboundary rivers, lakes, and aquifers are covered by operational arrangements for cooperation. Under the arrangement, the notion of arrangement, it's quite flexible. The idea, the most important is to highlight the intention of countries to commit to each other to cooperate on transboundary waters. That's why under arrangements, it is meant treaty, convention, agreements, or other formal arrangements between countries. It is also important for arrangement to be operational. An operational arrangement should meet 4 criteria that are presented in green color on the slide. The first one is the presence of a joint body or a mechanism, for example, a river basin organization for transboundary water cooperation. The second one is annual meetings of countries, of river basin organizations or other mechanisms to discuss the cooperation at least once per year. The third criterion is the annual exchange of data and information that could be done during the meetings or through the dedicated websites or another way. And the last one is adoption of joint coordinated water management plans or joint objectives. It is critical that the national report clearly sets out the status of all 4 criteria for each basin a country shares. The next slide, please. It is also important to highlight that the final 6.5.2 indicator value can be calculated only when 2 components of the indicator are available. And 2 components are transboundary river and lake basins, and the second one is transboundary aquifers. So far, there are more arrangements and more information on transboundary rivers and lake basins. The data and information on transboundary aquifers are lagging behind. And worldwide, there are not many arrangements on the aquifers that are directly dedicated to the aquifers. That is also indicated on the slide, directly dedicated, focused on aquifers. I can quote some examples like the Genovese aquifer in Europe, for example, or the Guarani aquifer in Latin America, and some others in Africa and in Asia that are directly dedicated to aquifers, and they are more easy to report in 6.5.2 because all 4 criteria are straightforward in these arrangements. The monitoring of 6.5.2 allows also for the cases when transboundary aquifers are integrated, considered in a broader river basin arrangements. In this case, it's very important to pay attention if transboundary groundwaters are indeed considered in the cooperation on the field, not only on paper. And the second point to pay attention at also is that when we have the case of overlapping rivers and aquifers, it is important to see that the delineation of aquifers is not only partly overlap with the river basin organization. In this case, the aquifers should not be reported as fully covered by a river basin agreement. Yes, that's all from my side, and I pass the floor to my colleague from UNECE for the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. So here you have an overview of the reporting templates and also its articulation with the guidance documents. So the template is composed of 4 sections. The first section contains information regarding the calculation of the indicator value. So all value are regarding surface water and groundwater as well. And then section 2, 3, and 4, they contain more descriptive information, and they help substantiate whether the operationality criteria that Tatiana mentioned before are met. And also they provide for the opportunity to report on informal forms of cooperation. So here it's possible to report at basin level where this the cooperation stands. On the next slide, you will see the main four guidance documents. So of course the template, the step-by-step methodology, which support the calculation of the indicator value, and it provides 5 steps to calculate it. Then a guide to reporting, which provides some explanation for each question from section 2, 3, and 4, and also practical example on how certain question might be answered, and also some further help on some guidance on how to organize the reporting process, also how to maximize the benefits. And lastly, the most recently developed document are the opportunities to coordinate with neighboring countries when completing the SDG 652 report. And this will have a presentation later on, which focus more on the possibilities to coordinate. Now, on the next slide, I'll mention I'll go through the main objectives of the third reporting. So as mentioned, we are in the third reporting time this year. So we hope also that you can build on the previous reports if your country have already submitted one. If you don't, please, we very strongly encourage you to submit one. So far, 80% of the countries sharing transboundary waters have participated, and we hope to continue increasing this rate in 2023. So the deadline to report is end of June, as per the previous reporting rounds. And we not only hope to increase the response rate, but also hope to improve the quality of the responses. So we very much hope that we'll have further information, so that also the information contained in the report can be reused, that EU countries can really take the report and use it as a basis to identify good practices, but also gaps in the cooperation, and hence strengthen also not only the monitoring, but also transboundary water cooperation. So for this third round, we both UNECE and UNESCO are maintaining a help desk, so don't hesitate to ask us some questions. We're also organizing several webinars, workshops, so at global level, but also at regional level. For instance, for Latin American countries, we'll have webinars in the coming week also, and a workshop in person with ESCWA also in May. As an overall, so we are collecting the data this year. We will analyze it, validate the results, and subsequently provide the data to the UN Statistical Division in the beginning of 2014. So on the next slide, we would just like to make a short focus on groundwater systems, because as we have seen, it's still an area where there's quite gaps. However, the reporting can be an opportunity to establish contact between different institutions, also to identify where new data are needed at national level. We also encourage you to use as a basis the global database that can provide for some information, at least for a basis, and of course encourage to consider further in the cooperation the groundwaters. Now on the last slide, a few tips and advices. We addressed the letter to report to the ministers responsible for transboundary water, and we request those reports to be signed by the competent authority. We highly recommend to have a key person or a key organization that would be responsible for coordinating the reporting at the national level, and also having, as Tatiana mentioned earlier, having links between the 652, 651 reporting focal point. We encourage you also to build on the previous reports. My colleagues have put in the chat the links to the previous report, where they're available online. And also don't hesitate to interact with us, also to send us draft report if there's any question, so that also it facilitates the validation process for the calculation of the indicator value. So I thank you very much for attending this webinar and listening, and I'm happy to answer the different questions with my colleague Tatiana. Thank you very much. Back to you, Ali.
That's great. Thanks, Sarah, and thanks Tatiana for that nice overview. So